why wouldn't she?
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Cheers, Ollie. Thanks very much. Welcome to Thursday's programme. Have you had a good day? Have you? I've had a decent old day. Looking forward to this programme. 2 heavyweight guests lined up for you this Thursday, November 8th, 2018. Your Richie Allen Show.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show.
That's the one, all right. That's the one.
It's the Richie Allen Show. Broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Welcome to terrific researchers and authors. Join me today. Dean Henderson from Missouri joins me this hour, and I'm sure he'll have something to say about the terrible shooting in Southern California overnight there. We'll talk about maybe a little bit about the midterms. We'll talk about Remembrance Sunday with Dean as well, and the First World War, and what I suppose students are not being taught about these wars in schools. This is going to be very interesting. And in the second hour, Neil Sanders joins me, another author, esteemed author as well. What more is there to say about Neil? He's been writing for several months now about Cambridge Analytica and Steve Bannon and the rise of right-wing politicians around Europe, and how that is being enabled through social media manipulation by Cambridge Analytica and other dark actors. This is very interesting stuff, and we'll pick it up again with Neil in the second hour. Live right now on Fab Radio 2 in this wet and windy Manchester, though beautifully autumnal. The colours are amazing around about the south of the city. Good to be with you. Right, let's get on with it then, because I want to get as much time with Dean as I possibly can. Before I go anywhere, I want to say hi to Shirley and to Jen, who are listening in Washington at a roundabout, I'm guessing. Is it Washington State, Jen? I think it is, isn't it? It's not DC. Is it DC? If it's Washington State, it's way back just after 9 a.m. If it's DC, it's just after noon, I think. Anyway, Jen and Shirley, thanks for tuning in. And to you as well for tuning in this Thursday. Yeah, lovely and autumnal. Running this morning as I do. And my run is lovely. It takes me through Alexandra Park and then back up Princess Road and then down the Fallowfield Loop. Trees and parks, and it's just lovely. Anyway, yeah. There must be a lot of estrogen in my water. Oh, you're not so much of a hard lad now talking about trees and leaves and all of that. Anyway, to more serious matters. You heard Ollie Barrett there in the news. 12 people, including a police officer, have been killed by a gunman in a bar in Thousand Oaks, California. Happened just before midnight, well, around about 11:20 a.m. last night, just outside of Los Angeles. Well, about 40 miles really northwest of it, according to the media here in the UK. A lot of people in there. It was hosting a university student night, and a man called Ian David Long has been named as the gunman, and it's been said that he had suspected mental health issues. This, of course, in the truly alternative media, will ring a lot of alarm bells, that he had mental health issues. Did he? And was he on antipsychotic medication? These are questions that I can't possibly answer. Tragically, of course, the Truther Industrial Complex has been saying hoax and staged and all that old nonsense this morning. Not that I know any better, but I don't know anything. I only know what, reporters and witnesses have been saying. And that is that somebody opened fire in the place and people were injured and killed. He's a former US Marine Corps veteran, apparently. And they reckon he might have taken his own life inside the bar. He used a .45 caliber Glock semi-automatic handgun. I don't know anything about guns. But I believe it's a deadly weapon, and he was able to use an extended magazine, meaning it could carry more bullets than it would ordinarily be able to carry. So it's nasty, right? If it's gone down the way people are saying it's gone down, it's a terrible thing. Truth are saying it's a hoax because nobody ever shoots anybody, right? Right? Right. People saying it's a false flag to bring in gun control. Really? Any proof of that? Again, I'm not saying that I know otherwise, by the way, but it'd be nice to have a little bit of proof before making statements like that. some of these people reduce every debate, every issue to black and white. Nothing is black and white. There are shades of grey everywhere. The government wants to disarm people, we're told. Yeah, I agree with that. I can believe it. And I can understand why responsible gun owners would be worried about people trying to take their guns away. But nutters do, and I don't mean this gentleman, if he was a veteran and if he did have mental health issues, I don't mean to describe him as a nutter. Leaving him to one side, other nutters can get guns and do stupid things with guns. And people with violence convictions, people with anger issues, can get a gun and run around with it. But you can't talk to these people who think everything is some sort of hoax, some sort of plan. I don't know. It's dreadful. We'll talk to Dean Henderson about it soon anyway. But I'll tell you something I did notice about this shooting. The coverage of it has been fairly restrained. More than normal. Usually it's non-stop coverage, even by the UK media when something like this happens in the United States. But there hasn't been that detail of coverage today. I wonder why. This is an interesting story, again, because of the reaction of Donald Trump supporters. The White House has suspended a guy from CNN called Jim Acosta. They've taken his press credentials away and he won't be able to attend briefings by the White House press secretary or by Trump himself in the near future. Why? Well, he was asking questions and Trump didn't want to take his questions. And then a White House worker, apparently an intern, tried to grab the microphone from Acosta's hands. Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders said access was removed because he had put his hands on a young woman. Now, this is patently bullshit. Regardless of what you think about the media or CNN or even this guy Acosta, this is nonsense that he put his hands inappropriately on this woman. Anyway, just in case you haven't heard it, and I'm sure you have, here's a little snippet of the exchange between Donald Trump and CNN reporter Jim Acosta.
I think you should let me run the country. You run CNN.
All right.
And if you did it well, your ratings would be much better.
If I may ask one other question. Mr. President, if I may ask
Peter,
one other question, are you worried?
That's enough. That's enough.
Mr. President, I
that's
was going to ask one other. The other folks have
That's
had,
enough.
Pardon me, ma'am. Mr. President,
That's enough.
Mr. President, I had one other
Peter,
question,
let's
if
go.
I may ask, on the Russia investigation. Are you concerned that you may have
I'm not concerned about anything with the Russian investigation because it's a hoax. That's enough. Put down the mic.
Mr. President, are you worried about indictments coming down in this investigation?
Mr. President.
I'll tell you what, CNN should be ashamed of itself having you working for them. You are a rude, terrible person. You shouldn't be working for CNN. Go ahead.
I think that's unfair.
You're a very rude person. The way you treat Sarah Huckabee is horrible. And the way you treat other people are horrible. You shouldn't treat people that way. Go ahead. Go ahead, Peter, go ahead.
In Jim's defense, I've traveled with him and watched him. He's a diligent reporter who busts his
Well, I'm
butt
not a
like
big
the rest
fan of
us.
yours either, so
I understand.
to be honest.
So let me ask you a question if I can. You repeatedly said...
You aren't the best.
Mr. President...
Yeah, now in another briefing, Trump interrupts a black reporter who's asking him about his use of the word nationalist and nationalism. Have a listen.
On the campaign trail, you called yourself a nationalist. Some people saw that as emboldening white nationalists. Now people are also
I don't
saying
know why you'd
that
say
the
that.
president...
That's such a racist
There are
question.
some people...
That's such a racist question. Honestly, I mean, I know you have it written down and you're going to tell me. Let me tell you, it's a racist question.
And Mr. President, I want to ask...
You know what the word is? I love our country. I do. You have nationalists, you have globalists. I also love the world. And I don't mind helping the world, but we have to straighten out our country first. We have a lot of problems.
And
Excuse me, but to say that, what you said, is so insulting to me. It's a very terrible thing that you said.
Nonsense. She was asking him to qualify his understanding of the term nationalist. Look, I'll tell you what's going on as briefly as I can. And when I say I will tell you what's going on, that's a bit arrogant. I'll tell you what I think is going on. I couldn't possibly defend the press. Whether it's CNN, Fox News, BBC, Channel 4, of course I can't defend the press. The press has been asleep on its watch. That's a mild way of putting it. The press has been owned and controlled by the financial elites and the controlling elites, well, forever and a day. So I'm not going to defend the press or what the press does. But what's actually happening here is Trump, not knowingly, because Trump doesn't know any better. What's happening here is through the creation of the false or fake news paradigm and through the shutting down of journalists at briefings and saying you can't answer questions because you're fake news, they're paving the way for future elected officials, elected representatives, to deny a member of the press corps to ask them a challenging question. That's what they're doing, making it easy for future, not so much just presidents, but future congressmen and women, future local councillors to say, no, you're fake news. You're fake. You tell lies. Your organisation tells lies. Now, the fact that the massive media networks of the world, Fox, as I said, CNN, Sky, BBC, the fact that they spend all of their time lying is actually irrelevant. No elected official should ever be allowed to decide who in a press conference can ask questions and who can't, and which news network is okay to ask questions and which isn't. Trump is happy to spend a lot of time with people like Sean Hannity. Now, if you want to talk about news organisations telling lies and spinning stories, I could do a week's worth of programmes on Fox News alone. This is dangerous. It's dangerous. And Trump's ignorant supporters, and by the way, most of the Labour Party supporters in this country are ignorant to what's going on. Most Democrat supporters are ignorant to what's really going on. They think it's fantastic that the fake news is getting its comeuppance. Well, what's going to replace it? What's going to hold the likes of Donald Trump or Theresa May to account? Who's going to do it? InfoWars? Really? Did you not see Alex Jones' pathetic interview with Donald Trump 3 years ago when you couldn't tell where Alex Jones' tongue was? It was so far up Trump's arse, it was coming out of his mouth. Is Jones going to do it? Ask the tough questions? Listen, I'm not immune to your annoyance with the press. It's very ironic that Nick Robinson, BBC political correspondent today, is standing up for Jim Acosta, saying that reporters should be allowed to ask questions and to hold these people to account. I'm well aware of the fact that they've never held anyone to account. Never. No reporter in my lifetime has ever properly held any elected official to account. But we can't allow elected officials or governments decide what's fake news and what isn't. We'll decide it. You will and I will. We'll decide, because CNN, Fox, C-SPAN, wretched and all as they are, there are news organisations, wretched and all as they are. But you can't give him the power to do that, to say you can't ask a question, you can't ask a question. I won't talk to you, but I'll spend 20 minutes with Fox News twice a week. Throw up a few softball questions about immigration. That's what's going on. It's more complicated than that, but that's the basic gist of what's happening. Trump is unaware of it. He's a narcissistic egomaniac, a madman. He's a puppet. He's unaware of it, but that's what's happening. What's going to replace the mainstream news? Oh, the alternative news, Richie, like you. Yes, but I can't ask questions of Donald Trump. I don't get to speak to Donald Trump or Theresa May or Jeremy Corbyn. Right? Okay. The Children's Commissioner for England is calling on internet giants and toy makers to be more transparent about the data they are collecting on children. This is a big story. Today's children are the first to be datified or datified from birth, and little thought has been given to the consequences, according to a report. Who Knows What About Me calls for a statutory duty of care between social media giants and their younger users, and it urges the government to consider strengthening data protection laws. The report highlights how very young children are now using toys that are connected to the internet. This is true. It's not just smartphones and tablets, of course, and smart watches and smart glasses that are connected to the internet. It's toys now. And this report, led by Sonia Livingston, has described children as the canary in the coal mine for wider society, because they are the first to encounter this new technology and its risks before they are actually even aware of the consequences, because children are not. And they've recommended a wide range of measures here. One of them to be teaching children in schools about how their data is collected. It's very interesting. And we might do more on that on the programme next week. In other news, briefly, I'm way behind already because I want to get Dean on. Theresa May will probably lose a Commons vote on her Brexit deal, according to David Davis, the former Brexit secretary. He was speaking to BBC Radio 4, and he said that defeat, and May will be defeated, no doubt, in the Commons, would prompt the UK and the EU to agreeing a better deal. He also said the UK had hundreds of plans ready in case there is a no-deal scenario. This is Davis speaking with John Humphrey on BBC Radio 4 today.
We'd leave, and there would be some hiccups in the first year, no doubt, but we'd have all the rights and controls over our own destiny.
But we don't have
future.
any plans for that eventuality.
Oh, yes, we do. Oh, yes, we do. We have about 300 of them.
Well, hang on. What?
Even when I left, they were very well advanced.
What? So that you mean we could leave next Thursday week and seamlessly all of these FTA deal, all of these agreements with all these other countries, these new trade relationships would happen, what, immediately?
They'd happen quite quickly.
That is simply not
No, I didn't say, you're putting all sorts of words in my mouth. I didn't say any of that. I said, firstly, we can manage the exit because the sorts of fears that are put up.
Wait a
minute. Yeah, manage the exit. Being a government's there to manage things sometimes, John. And
you could have fooled me over
the sorts of fears being put up. There'll be no insulin available, which is nonsense. It was proven to be nonsense. That there'll be food shortages, also nonsense, proven to be nonsense. That there will be problems. Let me finish. Let me finish. That there'll be problems on crossing from Dover to Calais. The people in Calais, the port authorities, the leader of northern France have all said that's not going to happen. So there's been a lot of scare stories. We're a big country. We can look after ourselves.
Right, we'll leave that there. Just very briefly before we move on, very interesting story in the Daily Mail today. One of the Daily Mail reporters has written a story, a woman called Emma Cleary, and she said that she has mumps, and she describes being in agony and having very serious side effects because of the mumps infection, and she's blamed parents who won't immunise their children with the MMR jab. And she says it's frightening stuff. She blames the internet, and she blames the movement of anti-vaxxers, and says that it could be a very big health thing going forward, that unvaccinated children could end up giving things like mumps to adults or older people, which could be catastrophic for them. Right? You know where that's going, don't you? Yes, it's going towards forced vaccination. It's going towards legislation where parents won't be able to opt out. Covered it a million times, I'm sure we'll cover it again. And a bizarre story to finish the monologue. Labour MP Jess Phillips, whom we've heard from quite a lot around the Labour anti-Semitism nonsense. Jess Phillips has been speaking today and has been saying that girls should be taught about orgasms in sex education classes at schools. She says it's important for pupils to learn about sexual pleasure to close the orgasm gap. Because apparently 65% of straight women usually or always orgasm compared to 95% of men. Jess Phillips telling the is it Grazia or Grazia magazine that women's expectations should be greater. We have to start demanding more. But she did say that she wasn't suggesting that we go into schools and teach little girls how to masturbate. Thank God for that. This is the Richie Allen Show, by the way, broadcasting live on Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, TuneIn Radio, triggerwarning.tv, and, of course, richieallen.co.uk. Or did I say that already? I don't know. Let's welcome to the programme my first guest, an extraordinary journalist, broadcaster, former politician and author. He's been on with me now for many years. It's a pleasure to welcome him back to the programme. I will, of course, as usual, put out details of his website and where you can find his books on Twitter. I know I don't need to do that because you are very familiar with his work already. Let's welcome back to the show my friend Dean Henderson. Dean, welcome back.
Hey, Richie. Always good to talk with you.
You're a gent. Thanks, by the way, for stepping aside yesterday. I was in absolutely engrossed in a very interesting conversation with a man with a very powerful personal story to tell. And great shout of thanks to you for stepping aside and letting me keep him on. Thanks for doing that, Dean. I appreciate that.
No problem. Yeah, that was a tragic situation, so it was good that you did that.
Well, thanks, mate. Yeah, thanks for not minding the inconvenience. I want to ask you straight up, isn't it interesting when there's a mass shooting event? I've always tried to kind of keep my big nose out of debates around guns. I respect the Constitution and I respect, people's rights to have a gun, especially people that are responsible, and I have no problem with all of that. And I kind of stay out of that. I don't think it's black and white, though. I think there are shades of grey. You can't not be concerned, though, when you learn about these shootings, and obviously we're talking about the very nasty events that took place in California overnight just north of Los Angeles. And we've learned today that a US Marine Corps veteran may very well have been involved, but that he had suspected mental health issues. And we hear this a lot, Dean. And when we hear this, a lot of respected researchers, they talk about antipsychotic medication and they wonder, is there a link between that and maybe some of these shooting, I don't want to call them events because, they're mass murders. What do you think when you hear a story like that and you hear that he used to be in the Marine Corps and that he was dealing with very serious mental health issues? You've got to wonder about it, right?
Yeah, it's hard to keep track of these shootings. That seems like there's one every 2 days or something. They're literally driving people nuts, I think, is a big part of it with this mind control, internet, constant, screen time. That's one aspect. I think the biggest aspect is just, hey, when you live in the belly of the beast, the military-industrial complex, the world's policeman. Ever since you're a little kid, you're basically watching your government give you this example where might is right. You have a problem, what do? You have a problem with Syrians or Nicaraguans or Venezuelans, what do? You go shoot them. That's what you do. So, it starts there, and it's no surprise that, a lot of these people that are involved in these shootings are military background people. It is also true that there's a lot of these psychoactive medications involved that they're giving these people. Again, literally driving them nuts, and also just the climate in this country of just division. They just keep dividing people along whatever line they can find to divide them. Everyone's got their own little fantasy world that they live in nowadays, and it's all about their sort of emojis or whatever on Facebook, and they're all wrapped up in that. They all want to be famous, they all want to be so important because that's the message, with all this stuff is they sort of patronize us and tell us all how important we are and how great we are at what we do, and even though a lot of what you see out there sucks, and it's terrible. But it's just increasingly, people are, it's like the Orwellian nightmare where you're under this camera and you're on TV all the time and you're like the reality TV star. And hey, we got a president who's a reality TV star, so that's not a coincidence. So, it's just the whole thing is just an indication of this this empire that's just gone completely mad. The government's been mad for quite some time, and now the people, I think, are going mad right along with it.
This is interesting.
Living this delusional non-reality. It's kind of a post-reality, post-fact epoch that we're in now. And the people that are aware and the people that are trying to say something about it, they're just marginalized and they're crazy conspiracy theorists. So that's kind of where we find ourselves. But onward we go, and some of us at least are going to keep telling the truth.
This is really interesting because I don't blame Donald Trump for this or any other politician. I think they're puppets. I think in Trump's case, he's the perfect patsy, a perfect frontman. But that elites, and I'm going to be talking to Neil Sanders later on in the programme about how, the right is being manipulated and stirred up by Cambridge Analytica and other organisations. I'm going to be talking to Neil about this. You and I have spoken about this. So what could very well be happening is people are being kind of driven into a state on both sides, not just on the right, but into a kind of a state where they think they're on some sort of crusade. They're being manipulated into a place where they're incredibly angry and outraged and full of bitterness and spite and vitriol, maybe more than we've ever seen in the past. And that might give rise to incidents where people with access to weapons just say, well, to hell with it today. I'm going to get up this morning and I'm going to put things right. That's what we might be seeing here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. There's a reason Trump is in power. Neil Sanders has done excellent research into this area, better than anyone I know. I wrote an article about this before I even came across Neil's stuff, which you sort of steered me to, and thanks for that. But yeah, when you got a Lord Mountbatten on the board of Cambridge Analytica and their stuff has to get export control licenses from the UK government, it's an MI6 front, right?
Yeah.
So it is. And so they obviously that's who put Trump in power, not the Russians. All these Russians involved were actually Russian oligarchs, many of whom live in the city of London, like Mikhail Friedman of Alpha Bank, which was used a long time, CIA drug bank associated with Halliburton and Dick Cheney and that crowd. So all these supposed Russians are actually these oligarchs who mostly hang out in the city of London and work for the crown. And so, he was put into place, and I still say because basically, Trump's a reality TV star. They really want to pull the whole spectrum further to the right because you have to understand the Rothschilds are eugenicists, which means they are Nazis, which means they hate black people, they hate working people, they hate brown people, they hate everyone who's not a bloodline, I guess Anunnaki bloodline, kin of theirs. And that's where this fascism really emanates from. It emanates from this other force outside of our perception, our 5 sense perception, I think. And David Icke talks about the Archon mentality, it's the Anunnaki mentality, but it's this mentality of a very selfish, very greedy, very lizard brain, grab for it first before anyone else grabs for it. Don't love anyone until they love you. You have to wait to get it. And this is what's going on, and Trump's the perfect person to put in charge and sort of pull things to the right with this mentality. But on the other side, you have the deep state now on the outside, the Clintons who, destroyed the Democrat Party in this country. Not that it already wasn't pretty destroyed, and pulling them to the right. And there was supposed to be this big blue wave in the midterms a couple of days ago, and that didn't materialize. And why? Because, for example, in Missouri, we had a minimum wage increase that passed. We had legalized medical marijuana that passed. A lot of progressive initiatives and referendums passed that were put forward by the people. And the minimum wage was 65-35, and Trump won this state by 25%. So in other words, a lot of Republican working class people voted for the minimum wage increase. So they understand, what the deal is, and they understand when things come along that actually help the working people. Problem is, Democrats don't help working people anymore. Democrats are uber politically correct, and they're worried more about, transgender and how you say things. And basically this political correctness, I saw it back in the 80s when I was going to grad school. And I founded the University of Montana Green Party. And I'll never forget, this fella comes along. He was later a city councilman. He was one of these uber politically correct people that were just starting to sort of infiltrate the left, the real left. And he says, you can't be the leader of the Green Party because you won't swear to nonviolence, because I just, that's me. I just say, well, I'm not a violent person, but I'm not ever going to say I wouldn't be violent. If you attack me, I might be violent. So don't attack me, which I think is pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
I'm just more militant. That's all. But that position is illegitimate anymore. Now, if you're a militant on the right, that's different. You can find a home in the alt-right. But if you want a party that's going to help stop wars, if you want a party that's going to give you unions back, if you want a party that'll support Venezuela, that'll support the attacks or defend the attacks that are going on against Ortega in Nicaragua, you don't have a party in this country. So I didn't vote for Claire McCaskill. It was this huge race, and she was gonna. And right at the end, she starts dissing she says, "Well, I could reach across the aisle and work with the Republicans and." And I don't know. I don't listen to the crazy people in my own party. And well, the crazy people in her own party used to be me because I used to be a Democrat, a left-wing Democrat, and I didn't even vote for her, and she lost. And I hope I contributed to her demise.
I'm sure you did.
Because this blue wave is just, you're not going to get a blue wave. You're not going to get anything until, Thomas Frank had it right. What's the Matter with Kansas? That's an excellent book about how the Clintons dismantled the Democrat Party, deregulated the banks, ended welfare. And basically said we're gonna go to bat on all these social lightning rod issues, like gun control, like abortion, like transgender, transhuman, all this They're all behind Silicon Valley, the Democrats. That's the driving force right now. So who are these people? So, David said, yeah, it's the George Soros hijacked this party. And that's kind of it. I mean, if Soros, Clinton's, but anyway, the elite, in other words, the oligarchy, have usurped the working person's party, which used to be the Democrats. It's happened here.
More. It's happened here as well, of course, with the UK Labour Party.
Yeah,
Let me ask you this, Dean. Let me ask you this. When... Yes, Soros, but I know you more than anybody. You know better than to blame Soros exclusively. He's playing a big part in what's happening at the moment. But I'm very interested in, as somebody who grew up as a very socialist-minded person, and I grew up in a family of trade unionists, and I believe in unions, and I believe in the workers owning the means of production, and of course I do, and a living wage for everybody, of course I do. When did it happen? Now, I've asked some academics on the programme recently this question. They've had different answers. When did the left, who used to be the greatest fighters for free speech, even for those they disagreed with, when did it kind of go 180 and the left became the greatest censors of free speech? When did it become progressive kind of cultural Marxist? When did that happen? Because it used to be the left would die for the rights of somebody, even Nazis, even Ku Klux Klan guys, socialists would say, no, let him on telly, let's argue with him. Not anymore. When did that change in your opinion?
Mm-hmm. Well, I really think, it's a really good question. And you got to go all the way back in this country. And Eugene Debs, he almost won the presidency in 1900, ran against Roosevelt. He was a socialist. He was a reasonable man who basically fought for the working people. That you carry it forward, you get the Wobblies come onto the scene, and there was a brutal attacks on the Wobblies, by the establishment, by the FBI, but they kept fighting. And then you come into the 60s, and the anti-war movement starts. This really started with the free speech movement in Berkeley, Mario Salvo and those guys. And they're a bunch of crew-cut lawyers and serious socialists, serious about they didn't get tied up in all this cultural warfare issues. But what happened, I think, when it started to turn was the whole, Laurel Canyon music scene and when the hippie movement was launched. And this was an intelligence operation. There was an Air Force research facility at the top of Laurel Canyon. This is where Jim Morrison come out of, and David Crosby and the Byrds, who couldn't even play instruments when they first started. And all of a sudden these nightclubs pop up in LA that are going to play these guys' music, and there's just this huge infrastructure. These record companies are paying these huge contracts to play this kind of crappy music, really. And this is where the hippie movement started, was in Laurel Canyon in California. It didn't start in Berkeley and Haight-Ashbury. It started in LA. And this is, of course, where the Charles Manson murders occurred later. And Manson was a part of this scene, and they just loved him. And to me, this is where, basically this was the MI6, Tavistock Institute, CIA people coming in and usurping, basically destroying the left forever with this hippie mentality, a sort of free love, drugs everywhere. Don't have any self-control. Don't be serious. Everything's a joke. Make fun of everything. This morphed into the New Age movement. There's also an element of matriarchy embedded in all this stuff, where basically they've neutered the guys and the women can run wild and do whatever they want. And this is the New Age movement, which is also officially part of the Freemason movement. If you look at the New Age magazine, the first issue of it, the inside cover, I saw this in Alex Constantine's book, Psychic Dictatorship, excellent book from way back. And it shows that first magazine, New Age, was published by the Grand Freemason Orient Lodge of Washington, D.C. It's printed in there. So this is all part of the mind control that started to basically take the left into what it was, which was a working class party that defended rights, that was militant, that really had their eyes trained on the oligarchy, the banking establishment, the robber barons, the big corporations, and knew that was the enemy, knew that the ruling class was the enemy, and that there was a class war being waged on us, and damn it, we were going to fight back. So with the hippies and then the New Age movement, and then here comes this politically correct stuff in the 80s, which I think, again, was an establishment operation. It was targeting the Democrats and the left with this nonsense, saying you're the ones that have to carry the banner of this. And a lot of people were dumb, and they picked up the banner and ran with it. And now with Facebook, Twitter, and the thought police, internet, which tends to be, this is what tends to be sort of, supported by the left. It's the left that's shutting down certain sites. It's the left that went after this Gab because of this crazy guy in Pittsburgh. It's the left that went after Alex Jones and wanted him gone. But it's not the left. And this is the bigger thing, is how they're, like Trump right before the election, you don't want these Democrats, they're going to turn into socialism in this country. And I'm like, yeah, I wish, because the Democrats have done nothing socialist for a long time. I mean, the Democrats have their chance and they do it Obamacare instead of single payer health care. And now they're wondering why it's getting taken apart. The Democrats never stood with trade unions. The Democrats deregulated banks. I mean, they haven't done anything socialist in a hell of a long time. But yet they're using the word socialism to describe Hillary Clinton, to describe these people, this entity, these Soros oligarchs. And so the part of it is to destroy the concept of socialism, which is what they're always trying to do, because it's the one thing that they know. I mean, if we can ever just learn to kind of unify and share and get serious and attack the ruling class and make that our enemy instead of Democrats, Republicans, men, women, blacks, whites, all this divide and conquer politically correct stuff, that's what it's designed to do, divide, then we'd be dangerous. And like Ortega's dangerous. Like Ortega, he's taken Nicaragua from the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, and now their economy's exploding. The literacy's exploded, the education, everything, healthcare, free, people are healthy, people are getting on their feet. And this is real socialism. This is real revolutionary, politics. But this stuff here, where they're throwing around these words socialism and Marxism, it's like, what does it even mean anymore? Because I don't even recognize any of these people. There's nobody protesting against Syria, the war in Syria. There's nobody protesting against the war in Yemen. Will any of these blue wave House Democrats, that they have the majority now in the House, will they come in and will they say, we need to pressure Saudi Arabia to stop the war in Yemen? We're not going to support it anymore. No, they won't. They'll say, we're going to launch another investigation into Trump over Russiagate. And it's just going to divide people more, and more people are going to shoot schools, and more people are going to go nuts, and more families are going to fall apart. And you're right, everybody's on a crusade. Everybody thinks they're 100% right. They know everything. Look, the one thing people should remember is to be humble and to remember that really we don't know shit.
Yeah, that's right. It's right. I was thinking the other day, I was looking at Twitter for about 10 minutes, and it's the first time I've done it for a long time. And I remember coming up in the media as a younger man, I was very reticent or reluctant to ever give an opinion on anything unless I knew a little bit about it, and then I would always preface everything by saying, well, it could be argued. Not that I was scared of giving it an opinion, but I was respectful of the fact that I didn't know everything. What we see today is, and I don't know, I think you've described the agenda brilliantly, not just today, but in your books as well, is we're creating acute narcissists who have no compunctions about opining on anything and everything, as if what they are saying is chapter and verse and is the gospel, and it's patently obvious that they haven't a clue. Right across the spectrum, whether it's left or right or whatever, it's a weird paradigm. It's weird to see people prepared to humiliate themselves, although again, maybe because of the acute narcissism, they can't possibly be humiliated, but just shouting out stuff about stuff that they know nothing about. And you can see what it's doing to people. People are actually digging themselves into, I think, a kind of a psychotic state, even if that might sound a bit mad, or it might sound like it's going too far. And that's where that anger then, they're wide open then. You mentioned David Icke earlier on. He would say that's a low vibrational state then to be in. And you're wide open then. If there are other forces in the universe looking to, create mischief and malevolence, you're wide open to that then. And why not? Do you know what? I'll go into a nightclub tomorrow morning. I'll shoot as many people as I possibly can. Why not? And I can make that link. It sounds preposterous maybe to some listeners, but no, it isn't. Brilliantly described there about the Democrats. They haven't done anything socialist since forever. No, they haven't. And if a Democratic politician was to emerge in the next 2 years and defeat Trump in 2 years, the idea that support to Saudi Arabia would end, the idea that support to psychotic, jihadi, lunatic, Wahhabist groups would end is farcical, Dean, isn't it? Because it's never going to end. Never.
No, it's not, and that's brilliant what you just said, Richie, about, it did, and it wasn't just you that used to be like that. Although, I was like that. I mean, more when I went to college, professors were like that. Professors were very cautious with their analysis. They would say, we think this is what's going on, but there was always this room for I might be wrong. And that's what's missing is nobody thinks there's any possibility that they could be wrong. And I think you hit it on the head. It's really it's destroying people's kind of souls, and it's leaving them open to this low frequency archon energy, and it is being promoted by the internet, just the presence of the internet, where you can just Google something or Wikipedia something or and then you can parrot that to everybody, and you damn sure you just know you're right. Boy, you got the facts, right? And it's just creating this super narcissistic culture where, everybody is always going to be right all the time. How can you get along in a society, in a world, in a family where that is the case, where everybody thinks they're always right all the time? You can't. It's going to disintegrate. The whole society, the whole family structure is going to just disintegrate, and everybody's just going to be living in their own little reality and sort of at odds and at war with everyone else's so-called reality. And I think this is part of the program. This is part of the mind control. This is like MK Ultra on a mass scale, and it's all about dividing, right? So now they've figured out how to divide everybody all the time. With this narcissism, with implanting this idea in people that they know everything and nobody else knows anything. And not only that, but now you're going to see the narcissism come back. And you're right. These narcissists don't even know they're making fools of themselves when they say these idiotic things. They don't even know. But that doesn't mean their minds and their souls aren't just being fragmented by this stuff. And it doesn't mean that they're not just being totally destroyed. And I saw this thing with Jordan Maxwell, and he was talking about the Israelis way back. The Hebrews had this thing where the mind could bring forward a monster, the mind. And this is what this is all about, this AI. It's not about, the heart chakra or anything. It's about the mind. It's about the intellect, the almighty intellect, right? The AI, artificial intelligence. And so that they're giving people this shot of adrenaline into their minds. It's garbage, it's misinformation, but it's going to their minds. And so that's the only part of them now that's working. There's no empathy, there's no heart, there's no love. Love is like, it's an anachronism, I think, And this is what's always held things together. And I must say, I'm especially seeing this among the girls, because I think the girls, they like being social. They always have. They've always been probably more social than men. Back in the day, they'd sit around picking peas or something and talking and shooting the breeze, and that's great. But now they've isolated us, and the only way the girls are communicating is on social media. And so they're being affected more, and they like that. I watched the election results, and the commentators were almost all women now. The football commentators are becoming women now. There are more record women candidates running for Congress in the United States. That's all great. That's all great. But it really makes you wonder when you start seeing things like, let's see, the glyphosate, the EMFs, and now I'm hearing the cell phone stuff. It affects males more than it affects women. So I really think what they're trying to do, I wrote an article about this called The Usurpation of the Yang, the Illuminati Usurpation of the Yang. So they're trying to knock out the men, the fire energy, the protector energy. They're saying you're not protectors anymore of these. The yang is basically gone, and we want all this feminine matriarchal stuff. If you're a transgender guy, you're not a threat. Hey, fine, we love you. You can be on TV. You can get in front of people. But the real men, the alpha men, are being sort of discredited, knocked out.
There's no room
actually
for him.
Attacked physically. Yeah. And then what's going to happen is the man is the Illuminati, the banker. He's going to say, okay, I'm the man now. And all you girls, you can just defend me and say yes or no, sir, to me, and kick your husband and your brothers and your father in the nuts and destroy him, because I'm going to take this over. And that's kind of what's going on. So the biggest thing I see going on under the surface is nobody wants to talk about this. No man wants to talk about this. Most men will just, if a woman says jump, they'll jump. If she's a mean woman, they'll jump twice as high anymore, and I'm seeing this everywhere. And so this is a real thing that especially women need to be aware of and take responsibility for what's going on. And it is like they're trying to wipe out the men because the men we're disposable. If there's a revolution to fight these guys, there's going to be women, yes. In Nicaragua, there was a lot of them in the Sandinistas, but mostly it's going to be men.
Do you remember years ago?
They don't want a bunch of 18-year-old guys hanging around with no work, thinking about revolution. So they're going to wipe out the men first. That's pretty clear in this depopulation thing. That's what I'm starting to really see kind of accelerating on this side of the pond anyway.
I remember years ago watching an episode of The Sopranos, and Tony Soprano was lamenting to his psychiatrist, Jennifer Melfi, about all the crying and whinging that men were doing about being stressed and fed up and bored and all of that. And Tony Soprano said, now I know it's ironic, Tony is a sociopathic murderer, but he did say, what happened to Gary Cooper? What happened to the strong silent type? And when you were talking about that, I go out to the city centre with Caroline, and I'm probably an old-fashioned man, a red-blooded man. At least I think I am anyway. And I'm amazed at how many young men you encounter in city centres in England who are wearing skinny jeans, very tight jeans, are wearing very effeminate clothing, are carrying bags like man bags, but whom now are wearing makeup. And because I know I'm an old-fashioned fool from yesteryear, I'm humble enough to admit that. So I go to a well-known pharmaceutical chain and I get speaking to a girl behind one of the makeup counters. This is true now. And I ask her, and she said, yeah, we're seeing a 3-fold increase year on year on young men coming in to get makeup. And I asked her about it, and I said, and what about the skinny jeans and the really effeminate tight clothing, the kind of, what's the word I'm looking for here now, kind of androgynous clothing? And she said, yeah, all the time. And I said, right. So obviously I didn't say any more because, I'm not going to be scaring the bejesus out of a young woman behind a makeup counter. But in my mind, I'm thinking, we're fucked, men. What's happening to young men? What is happening to young men that they're looking like that, they want to live like that, and they're getting made up
exactly. And I think it's because it's becoming the Borg. That's what the Borg want. Okay. So if you're going to be, just an old fashioned kind of guy, it's dangerous. You're going to be targeted. These people are going to come at you with everything they got to try to, basically castrate you and shut you up, man. And don't go after those guys. They're not so bad. And, don't defend me. I don't need defending. And you're going to get a lot of problems. Okay. That's why these guys are going that way, because it's the path of least resistance, but it's what they want. CIA put out a document in 1969. They said there's not going to be any genders by 2030.
Yeah, that's right.
The gray aliens do not have a sex. So they literally have abducted women to carry the baby grays and put them out. So are we already a bunch of, is there cyborgs among us? Are there gray hybrids among us? Are they going for this whole asexual thing? Because that's what it looks like. And what they definitely don't, but what they're definitely pushing is this feminization, this continuation of sort of this matriarchy underneath of this bigger thing, because it's the way to keep people quiet. Men, when it's patriarchy, they go out and they just get brutal and they just beat people up and they just whatever. And that's bad. But matriarchy is just as bad, because it's kind of like, oh, don't say that. You can't say that. You can't criticize that person. You can't. Oh, really? I can't criticize the depopulation of 90% of the people? But yeah, no, you can't. You're not supposed to, because the man told me so. The man told me not to let you. And so I'm going to not let you do that, honey. And it's just like, wow. So that's what's going on. And it scares the hell out of me, because if it's that heavy, and especially if the girls refuse to see it, and I don't see a lot of them that are really willing to look at it right now, because they got it pretty good right now. I mean, they're kind of on the gravy train. They get patronized. They get, on Facebook, oh, you're so cute. Oh, your stuff's so great. And you hear that all the time. And it's just like, wow. And it's just what they don't need. And it's trap. but it's instant gratification, and they just eat it up and they think it's great. And this is part of the thing. This is part of what's going on. I mean, they're going for this thing where they're going to knock out any real defense. Look, if you're an invading force, what are you going to knock out first? You're going to knock out the warrior class, right?
You're going to get rid of the men. Yeah, Dean, let me just, because I have a couple of questions, and we're going to go, I think, till about 5 minutes past the hour. We normally go for an hour. We're a little bit tighter for time today. Again, thanks for understanding that yesterday. And Dean will be back before Christmas. I have no doubt about that. We'll do a full show with Dean's permission. But I want to ask a couple of questions. HendersonLeftHook.wordpress.com, by the way, is where you'll find Dean, and also where you'll find his amazing wife, Jill, who was fantastic on this programme a few weeks ago as well. And I look forward to speaking to Jill again. Jean Ann, my friend and colleague, asks, what can women do about this to counteract it? Now, I'll ask you to be as brief as you can with that answer, because I've got a brilliant question from Jen. Jen is listening in Washington, and it's about censorship of right-wing content creators. So first of all, what can women do about it?
Good question. I think first thing is hold your family close and protect them, especially your brothers, your husbands, your fathers. Be really careful about falling into the trap of, just going after them. I mean, that's the most important thing. Second thing, refuse to be patronized. Refuse to be buttered up. Refuse to be flattered. If you have your picture on Facebook, make it into something else. It's not about your looks. It shouldn't matter. You want to be equal, right? So don't use your pretty face to try to get an advantage or try to manipulate people, because they're using the girls to do that right now. And don't do it. I mean, I want you to be equal too. Let me be clear. We're all equal. It's just that we're being attacked, and you need to help us. And this is the best thing you can do. But you really have to protect your family.
Absolutely.
I mean, I had a girl come in here the other day. She's a really nice, she's a friend of mine. And she was here for a few days. She's talking about her baby boyfriend. I had a baby boyfriend. Then they had this other baby boyfriend. And I'm like, man, if I went around talking about my baby girlfriends and I was this kind of older single guy, I would be just totally slapped down. But somehow that's okay to sort of be a cougar and have baby boyfriends. It's not okay. It's fine with me, but just you don't have to make it like it's some like control thing that you're proud of or something. You know what I mean? So just really, man, there's so much going on in that space that women need to just step back from and just go, wow, I didn't even see that was happening. I didn't even see that was happening to my husband. I didn't even see that happen to my brother, my father, whatever, my friend, my male friend. I didn't even see that we were doing that to you. But it's not. It just can't be acceptable anymore because it's out of control.
Brilliant. One of the things we might get into in the future is the importance of raising children. I got into a bit of trouble about 3 years ago on this programme when I was being dismissive, foolishly, and again, I'm quite happy to admit when I'm wrong, but I was dismissing the importance of hunter-gathering. Of course, hunting and gathering is obviously vitally important, but I was trying to make the point that raising children is the most important job in the world. And that got misinterpreted as me saying that women shouldn't be working in offices, women shouldn't be lawyers, women shouldn't run banks. I wasn't saying that. I was saying that somewhere along the line, something happened to make us think that these things are very, very important, when the most important thing in the world is nurturing a child. We might get into that in the future. That's food for thought. Jen in Washington. Now, Jen's a long-time listener of the programme. I don't know what Jen's politics are. I think, like me and you, I think she's open-minded, and I don't think she'd nail her colours to any one mast. She loves Dean. She says on the tweet here, what does Dean think about the massive amount of right-leaning content being censored on social media platforms? And that is true. We can't deny that. Whatever we think about who's behind it, and whatever we think about some of the right-wing stuff, the fact is a lot of right-wing content creators are being booted off YouTube, Google, and Twitter. What do you think of that?
It's terrible. I'm totally against it. And these people have a lot to contribute. Most of my subscribers on my blog, it's so ironic because it's called Left Hook, but most of them are conservative right-wingers. It's really strange because, I don't know, the truth just cuts through people and it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter. But it's terrible. And anytime you censor anything, it's terrible. I mean, everybody should have a platform. Everybody should be able to talk. And the scariest thing right now is that you don't even have rights to complain about this under the First Amendment, because the First Amendment is a government thing. It's guaranteed by the government. These are private corporations. that decide outside of the First Amendment who can talk and who can't. And so it's really fascism. I mean, it's not the state deciding, it's private corporations deciding. And these private corporations, these Silicon Valley mafia, they claim to be liberals, but in fact, it's infiltrated Mossad stuff, New World Order stuff. It's nothing to do with anything liberal or socialist or anything. So here's another thing is everybody needs to realize that Silicon Valley is an operation of the British Crown, and it's not our friend, okay? Now, if you want to stay on Facebook and all that stuff, that's fine. I think you're crazy. But if me and Richie got off, but at least realize that when you get on the computer and you're on Google, it's the enemy. Okay, it's not your liberal, progressive buddy just because it has a ponytail or whatever. It's fascism under the same old, face as they marched out the hippies with the ponytails, the hippies, yeah, those guys. And they're trying to knock out progressives. They're trying to knock out us. And so, no, and it's creeping fascism. Anytime you censor anyone, it's wrong, okay? I mean, it's just wrong. And that's what I think about that anyway.
Yeah, I think it's privatized fascism. It's your idea. You said it. That's the word. They've basically outsourced fascism to these companies that can delete people. It isn't, and I know Jen knows this, it isn't, of course, just right-wing content creators. It's a lot of alternative content creators. And alternative, I believe, and there aren't too many alternatives around, are people that reject the system and are not supporting either left or right-wing or liberal or conservative commentators that get deleted. My own, and I've not really cried about it or bitched about it. I've mentioned it a few times, but I've not looked for any sympathy. But my own channel being deleted back in February was an absolute disgrace, because I don't support any candidate. There's nothing racist or hateful on the channel, and to be getting towards 100,000 subscribers and 20 odd million views, and for them to just say, well, that's it, you're gone in the blink of an eye. And I didn't feel sorry for myself because it was happening to everybody else. But it's not just right-wing content creators, but the right-wingers scream the loudest about it, and they get the most attention from the mainstream media. This is very ironic. Tommy Robinson, for example, had less subscribers than me, less views than me back in February of this year. I get booted off, not a word from anybody. Robinson gets booted off Twitter, and his YouTube channel gains 1 million subscribers. They scream the loudest about it, but we don't scream about it. Nobody listens anyway.
Yeah, and that's part of the agenda too, Richie. You can be a Republican, you can be a Democrat, or you can be an alt-right person. But if you're an alt-left person, you're just going to be ignored and your YouTube channel is going to be deleted. I mean, I was totally harassed on Facebook all the time. They knocked out a lot of my posts, and I finally said, I'm going to preemptive strike them and just go. But I had a lot of YouTube stuff where they changed my name. I had stuff with you where they took down interviews.
Yeah.
And so, and the Latin American left especially targeted, the Iranian left especially targeted. I would say that actually the majority, this is an important point you make, the majority of people censored on social media are actually left-wing radicals. But that, yes, the right wing, they hold up as victims so that they can sort of drive people into that camp. Because, economically, Ayn Rand, hey, it ain't where it's at, baby. It ain't going to get us out of this. It's why we're where we're at right now.
Let's do a big show in December before Christmas at a date of your choosing. Let's do a couple of hours, and because there's a lot that came up there. You talked about cyborgs and stuff like that, and that's really opened a can of worms on Twitter. Our listeners are all over that. My friend in Ireland is interested in that. I'm very interested in that. And Gray's as well. I want to get into that with you, Dean. We're just about out of time for today, though. It segues beautifully into Neil Sanders. I did say at the top of the programme, two fantastic writers and researchers and authors today on the programme, connecting dots. I really do mean that. It's extraordinary stuff. And I would like to get into that nature or nurture thing in the future, and how nurturing children and raising, children. I mean, what could be more important than educating and raising a child? It's not saying to women, stay in the kitchen where you belong. That's ridiculously antiquated, old-fashioned nonsense. It's not about that. It's about what happened along the way that women began to believe that working as a barrister, all noble stuff, don't get me wrong, working in a bank, running a massive company is actually more important than raising a child. And of course, I know there are women listening to this now go, you misogynistic bastard. I know what you mean, Richie. I know what you mean. You just want to have it all for yourselves. No, I don't want to be a barrister either. I want to be there raising a child. I don't want to have to work for the man either, you know?
Everybody should quit their job, not just women.
Exactly.
And by the way, cooking is the second most important thing because food is important. And if man wants to cook, great. But I mean, when they say a woman shouldn't cook, what are they really undervaluing? Cooking. They want you to go out to eat at Applebee's every night. When they say a woman shouldn't raise a child, what are they really undervaluing? Raising a child, not women. It's not misogyny. It's mind control. And it's made you a slave in debt and working for the man. So everybody should get out of debt, and everybody, man and woman, should quit working for the man. Hey, if we had a general strike tomorrow, guess what? This whole thing would just collapse, baby.
Wouldn't it, Dean? Wouldn't it? If everybody in a community said, no more council tax, no more income taxes, we've had enough, we absolutely turn our back on your agenda, on your paradigm, and we refuse to accept the reality. We're going our own way. All you need is a few thousand people to do it at the same time. When one or two people do it, they go to prison. When thousands do it, as Gandhi demonstrated, you know, you bring down the British Empire. I'm telling you.
I've been on general strike for 26 years.
Do you know,
I'm just waiting for everybody else. Let's do it.
It's brilliant having you on, Dean. I can't say that enough times. HendersonLeftHook.wordpress.com. Give Jill her best. Let's get a date for early December, and let's do a full 2 hours. And because a lot of questions came in there from listeners who follow your work avidly, and it'd be lovely to do a Q&A with you for 2 hours in December.
Sounds great, Richie, and I look forward to listening to Neil. He's an excellent researcher, and I'm looking forward to that too. So, and thanks always for having me on. You stay healthy and stay wise, brother.
Cheers, Dean. Thanks so much for that. The brilliant Dean Henderson live on the line to us from Missouri there. If you haven't checked out HendersonLeftHook.wordpress.com, HendersonLeftHook.wordpress.com, do it now. And Dean's books, including the most recent book and the books he's co-written with Jill, Illuminati, Agenda 21, Big Oil and their bankers in the Persian Gulf. Amazing reads, folks. Amazing reads. I'm telling you firsthand. I've got the books here. Read them. You'll do a lot worse than that. Right, we're coming up to 5 past the hour then. Neil Sanders is standing by, I think, and he's been working now for months on investigating, and it's brilliant work, Cambridge Analytica, this MI6 firm, and their influence on the rise and the successful rise of right-wing politicians and right-wing parties, not just in the United States and in the UK, but around Europe as well. And you can follow that work by going to neilsandersmindcontrol.com. Just click on blog there. All the articles are there, free of charge. Check it out. But he'll be joining me in a couple of minutes' time, and we'll get into it with him, and we'll get an update because we've been following this very closely with Neil for the last few months. All right. For the questions that came in for Dean, I'm sorry I didn't get to all of them. That's why we'll do a 2-hour Q&A with Dean in December, and I'll get through as many questions as I possibly can. Fascinating stuff. This is the Richie Allen Show, by the way, for Thursday, November 8th, 2018. My name is Richie Allen. How you doing? How the hell are you? Live on Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, triggerwarning.tv, TuneIn Radio, and richieallen.co.uk. Always good to be with you. Stay tuned for Neil Sanders. After this, from The Who, this is Baba O'Reilly. Right, yeah, that's The Who and Baba O'Reilly on the Richie Allen Show. It's exactly 9.5 minutes past the hour. Next guest doesn't need very much introduction either. He's a musician and author, terrific author, and he's known for his absolutely stellar work on the areas, in the area of mind control, which we've talked a lot about with him, MK Ultra Mind Control. He's written books like Your Thoughts Are Not Your Own, a terrific book, Now the Only Thing That's Real, about Charles Manson, which we talked about on this programme as well. Check him out at neilsandersmindcontrol.com if you haven't done before, but I'm sure you have. Of late, he's been conducting fascinating and brilliant research into Cambridge Analytica, this company, and its links to the rise of right-wing political parties as I said earlier, in the US, in the UK, but also around Europe. And of course, this is very topical and very timely at the moment, with Orban in Hungary, with Liga, 5-star coalition in Italy, Brexit, of course, which we talked about last time he was on as well. And this research is ongoing, and it can be found at neilsandersmindcontrol.com. If you click on blog, you'll get to it. It's very, very detailed. It's heavy going in parts, but not really. He's a brilliant writer. You know, it's there's a lot of detail in there, a lot of stuff to digest, but he writes so well, it's easy to stay with. For an update on this, let's welcome back to the programme our friend Neil Sanders. Neil, great to have you back. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Richie. Thank you for inviting me back.
Not at all. It is timely, isn't it, with what's been happening in Hungary, what's been happening in Germany, of course. The second biggest party now in the country is a right-wing political party, an anti-immigration party. We've seen it in Italy. I'm told, although I've seen no evidence of it, I'm told that right-wing parties are even planning to emerge in Ireland, Neil. It'll be a cold day in hell, I believe, but who knows? But this is serious stuff, and you introduced me to the concept that the firm behind this, or certainly central to a lot of this, Cambridge Analytica, is far from... I mean, I argued with you when we first spoke, to be the devil's advocate, but also because, you know, as a committed Brexiteer, maybe I was a bit sore, maybe I was thinking, you know, this is Brexit derailment stuff, but it isn't Brexit derailment stuff. This is serious, and your research shows this. Do you want to give us a summing up, and you can take as long as you want, for our listeners who might be new to this? Do you want to give a brief overview of what you've done up to coming on today?
Sure. Okay. I forget exactly what we talked about last time, where we got up to, but essentially there's this company. It used to be called SCL, and it was founded in the 90s by an MI5 spy called Nigel Oakes, who's friends with the royal family. And it has backing from a lot of sort of conservative lords and friends of the Queen. It's also connected to things like Marconi Defence and people that are involved in BAE systems and that type of thing. And what they did in the 90s was they were looking at the behavioural sciences, and they founded a company called the Behavioural Dynamics Institute. And they basically realised that by using psychology in propaganda, it was a far more effective tool in manipulating people. And they basically financed themselves and sold themselves as a PSYOPs organisation. In 2011, they presented a suggestion to the British government that they could create a false explosion at a chemical plant in England, and through false media outlets convince the public that this was a real event. And from there on in, the British government got sort of even more involved with that company. They boast about essentially influencing elections all over the world, and like they brag on their website about influencing the colour revolution in the Ukraine and being behind elections in Argentina and Nigeria and Kenya and Italy and Greece and various other. They boast of over 100 elections that they've been involved in directing the outcome of, and they do this by basically spreading either propaganda, usually via videos, or just, you know, general good old propaganda that's directly sort of marketed at your fears, at the sort of, what they do is, like any good propaganda, they'll take the sort of dissatisfaction of the people in a realm, in a country, and they'll also sort of look at the things that are sort of worrying them, the loss of culture, loss of identity, the disassociation from people in power, the idea that the country's going to hell and all these things. And because all propaganda's got to have an element of truth, there is an element of truth to a lot of this. These are certainly the fears that people are worried about. So what they do is they hyper-accentuate that, and they leverage a false enemy in order to basically drive people. Over the years, they've been very, very involved with the Pentagon and the British government. They've got ongoing contracts with them, looking at sort of data management and ways of manipulating people. And as I say, the board members include like members of MI5, MI6, and the Pentagon and US Marines and that type of thing. So this is essentially an arm of the government. It's almost like Stratfor. It's like a defence contractor that is connected to the government, but isn't connected to the government on a sort of paper basis.
How did they keep this out of the press over the years? I'm fascinated by this. I mean, your work, I'm not just kissing your backside. You know, there's a lot of this that really annoys me, and it's not because it challenges previously held positions of mine. Maybe it is a little bit, but I'm honest enough to admit that it annoys me for other reasons. Why did the press not pick up on this in the last 7-8 years?
Well, they have very, very briefly. A couple of bits came out in the sort of recent inquiry, and basically there's an ongoing sort of investigation into Aaron Banks because Leave EU. Later, SEL basically got some money from Steve Bannon and Robert Mercer and the Mercer family, and they formed an offshoot called Cambridge Analytica. And essentially, they tied in together with people. It seems that they got together with people from Palantir, which is Peter Thiel, who's ex-CIA funded venture capitalist. It's a data mining firm as well. And what Cambridge Analytica did was they stole or bought Facebook and social media data, emails, and all sorts of things that hasn't actually come out yet. And basically, they applied their algorithms to it and decided what was going to be an effective propaganda campaign to directly straight at you by looking at your likes, dislikes, and then creating sock puppet accounts that would interact with you to sort of G you along and go, yeah, no, this is terrible, you're right. Now that came out, but was sort of quickly quashed. And the reason essentially that I think that it's not really coming out, and also the reason that I think that basically people are looking more to Russia for sort of like meddling in elections, is because Cambridge Analytica is two things. It has a List X clearance with the British government, which means that it has a license to hold British government documents of a rating, a classification of secret and higher, which means that top secret, magic eyes, all of that, Cambridge Analytica can hold and it can use and it can utilize. The other point is that it's got an export control. Now, what's an export control? People might have heard of Theresa May going on about export controls because with the recent Khashoggi murder, people were saying, well, is it really a good idea to be selling weapons to the Saudis if they're murdering like journalists with impunity? And she assured the public that weapons are under export control, and Britain has got the highest standard of export control in the world, which means that essentially it has to go through a government committee before this can be used. And it was revealed in the inquiry into the Brexit and Leave EU referendum sort of debacle that Cambridge Analytica is under export control by the British government, which means that it's a weapon. It's considered a psychological warfare weapon, and it is not allowed to be used without the say-so of certain members of the British government and certain members of the British intelligence, which means that certain members of the British government wanted the outcome of the EU referendum that happened. They wanted to leave the EU. It also means that certain members of the British government also wanted Trump to be elected. But then if you look at the connections with the people who are sort of financing it and the media arms that are utilised to spread these messages as well, you're basically looking at the Mercer family, many people from Goldman Sachs, the Regnery family, the Shillman family, the Koch brothers, the Wilkes brothers, the DeVos family, and the Rosenwald family. So essentially you're looking at the very, very cream of right-wing elites within the aristocracy, for want of a better word, of the American system, also wanted these outcomes to happen. And then basically if you look at how and who is sponsoring these people through Rebel Media and Gatestone, same people. It's the Horowitz Foundation, it's the Rosenwalds, it's the Mercers, and these are financing arms like the Daily Caller and the Rubin Report and Tommy Robinson and Laura Loomer and Lauren Southern and Tommy Lauren and stuff like that. So essentially the reason this hasn't come out in any major way, to my mind, is because this is a weapon of MI5 and MI6.
And it could be argued, and we may have touched on this before, you know, these organisations pretty much own the media. Yeah. Not just this new wave of internet giant right-wing media, but they own the establishment corporate media, effectively.
Absolutely.
Hence, you don't get the sort of investigations that you should have had. A couple of quick questions on behalf of the old Brexiteers there. They will say, right, Aaron Banks is an arsehole. He is. I mean, listening to him, my God. His performance with Andrew Marr, you know, and I'm look, I'm not going to go over old ground again. For me, there are a million reasons why the European Union shouldn't exist and why the UK shouldn't be a member of it.
Absolutely. I'm a bit of a Eurosceptic myself, Richie, but I just looked at this and went, hang on.
Yeah,
and from a frying pan into another frying pan.
You've opened my eyes to this. And I was speaking today with a friend of mine who's a genuine socialist, a real trade unionist. And he says, and he understands the dangers of the federalist superstate that's going to be created. But he quite rightly said to me, and I'm not a know-all, so I love these conversations because I'm educated when I speak to people like you. I understand that leaving the European Union and then handing everything over to the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg and Boris Johnson, it's not a good idea. These are not good people. I know what they want to do. They're not going to, they don't want to leave the European Union so that they can regenerate fishing communities all over the country on Britain's coast. They don't. You and I both know this. This is the bloody paradox. So Brexiteers will say, right, so Aaron Banks, they break all these rules. The Leave side spent more money in this country than the Remain campaign spent more money in the UK than the Leave side did. There's no doubt about that. What you're saying is that it didn't matter what the Remain campaign spent. Such was the massive weight of the power of this company, Cambridge Analytica, and all the offshoots that you just mentioned. You're saying it doesn't matter who spent what, really.
Well, I mean, it wasn't. It's simply. Well, yes. Yes, in the short answer. Yes, but in the long answer, because basically the thing is that, as you rightly say, the yearning to leave the European Union was there anyway. Like, there's this disconnection with politicians. There's this way to. This is how Trump got in. This is how Farage sort of because I'm a man of the people. I'm not like these normal politicians.
Yeah.
There's a dissatisfaction. People are being screwed over, and this very clever bunch of millionaires and billionaires swept in and, using their own words, leveraged a false enemy to drive people towards it. So, as I say, it's an effective psychological warfare weapon.
Here's the $64 million question, by the way. Neil Sanders, mindcontrol.com. If you haven't read Neil before, I endorse him. I only speak with people on this program whose books I've read, and they are fantastic, life-changing stuff for me. The books and articles that have given me a moment of pause. What you've made me think is these billionaires and these financiers, I think these same people set up the European Union. They set it up, right? They did back in the day. It was industrialists who supported the Nazis in the World War II, who wanted to control a Europe run by the Nazis, not because they necessarily liked Hitler, but they could have the spoils then. They could basically take over the continent and then replace Hitler if they want. We know who these companies are, the petrochemical companies of the world. You've led me to this conclusion, and now you're going to tell me I'm wrong. I love this. You're going to tell me I'm wrong, but I think you've led me here. The same people who wanted the European Union, wanted to create it as a way of centralising power into their narrow, tiny hands, might be fed up in terms of that it's not moving fast enough for them. Now they might want to destroy it. Am I onto something here?
I think that's really plausible, to be quite honest, Richie. I think that a lot of this is down to sort of greed and avoidance of tax laws, and the fact that, as you say, I'm under no illusions. The EU is a mess. It's a bureaucratic nightmare. It's an absolutely overstuffed, decadent waste of everybody's time. But on the other hand, there's the economic sort of centre. So I think there's a degree of breaking up the sort of economic power of the EU. And I also have an idea that essentially people are easier to control. And this isn't really a dig at nationalism, although I'm not really keen on nationalism. But if you give them any cause, right, then that people can be passionate about, then you can direct them, because you can tell them that people are arguing against that or sort of denigrating that. And so nationalism can be used as a tool to sort of rile people up into sort of, well, look at America at the minute. There's all these people who apparently are anti-government and anti-deep state, but are fervent supporters of the President of the United States.
Yeah.
Which some people would say is a paradox.
It is a paradox.
But that's the genius of it. It's to get people behind. Look at Putin as well. Putin is an absolute autocratic monster. He murders journalists. He murders his own civilians. His citizens. He's stolen literally billions and billions of dollars.
Well said. Well said. Despite the fact that he's doing the right thing in Syria, despite the fact that he's preventing the Zionists from getting what they want in the Middle East, he's a fucking gangster. Of course he is.
Absolutely. But this is the thing. Here's the thing, and this will sort of hopefully that there's an involvement of Israel as well, because if you look at the financing, it comes from the Israeli Defense Fund, the Horowitz Foundation, who's connected to the IDF, the Shilman Foundation, and the Middle East Forum, which is a hard right-wing Israeli pro-Israeli thing. Pro-Israeli foundation, and they are financing people again like Tommy Robinson, Tommy Lauren, Laura Loom and stuff like that. There's pipelines in the Ukraine and there's pipelines in Syria. And again, I can't quite get my head around what it is, but it's something to do with owning those pipelines, because they're going to be basically the main hub for sending gas and across Europe.
Yeah, I think you're onto something.
That's what's going off. There's an argument that's going off between Israel and America and Russia and Europe about the sort of control of those pipelines. And that may well be like a completely, a really sort of like accessory sort of thing. Like it might be the main thing.
No, you have to consider it. I think you have to consider it. I'm going to argue with you here. Look, on the nationalism thing, I don't believe I have a right-wing bone in my body. No. I don't. But I'm going to say this, right? I think sovereignty is important, Neil. I really do. And I think, as I'm an Irish nationalist, I believe in the United Ireland. I'm obviously not naive. Ireland is in the situation it's in. And that can only be achieved in the future politically. I'm well aware of that, but I believe sovereignty is important. I believe that the people behind these agendas, and they're a tiny, tiny bunch of people, I believe. They've wanted forever to eliminate the idea. These are people behind multiculturalism. Now, look, I can't believe. Again, I grew up in a family of trade unionists. I consider myself still somebody who believes in the pure socialist ideals. But multiculturalism in terms of, listen, we're all the same. We all have the same enemy. We are being suppressed by the same enemy, regardless of what your colour is, regardless of your sexual orientation, regardless of whatever. But those people, they've used immigration to drive wages down, to make living conditions more difficult.
Yes, they have.
Haven't they, right? Again, and that's why sovereignty is important. And I also believe that culture is important. And I believe that countries, or at least people who live in a country, I believe that English people are entitled to say, and I know you can laugh at me if you want, and you can say, well, Richie, how would you define English culture? I don't know. But I think people are entitled to think,
I'm an Englishman and proud.
Yeah. And we do think a certain way here.
I'm not like nationalism, like any cause can be used like that. And I'll tell you exactly how they do it with nationalism. What they do is they tell the dominant group, all propaganda has to have an element of truth. So all this sort of like fear of loss of culture, immigration, lack of standards, driving down wages, these are real concerns. But what they do is they hyper extenuate that to make it seem like an insurmountable thing. And like, this is essentially how the propaganda works. And essentially this is how fascist propaganda works, but it also can be used in like communist, it's how extremist. Yeah. What you do is you tell the dominant group that they're under threat. You also give them a mythic past, an explanation of things used to be really, really good. Then what you do is you tell people that the current system is corrupt and that they need to rally against that. And then what you do is you utilize all the people like immigrants, these people that you have just enough knowledge about to be frightened of, but they're not powerful enough to really have a forum to argue back. And that's how you take something that it could have absolutely no negative connotations like nationalism, and you use it and you manipulate people's emotions in order to do that. And that's exactly what how it's been used. So I have no problem with people saying I'm English and proud. That's great. My argument to that is always when people say, English culture is being eroded, I would say, well, go out and Morris dance then. It's a bit like people that complain that the city centre has got no shops anymore, but buy all their stuff on Amazon. If you're really, really keen on English culture, then proudly talk about English culture. Go visit heritage sites. Like join groups that do it, that look at English culture and do the things that you enjoy.
I could make an argument here now.
People to do it for you.
Fair enough. I can make an argument here now on that. I can make an argument on what you've just said, because I've spoken to some very interesting academics recently, including a guy called Dr. Stuart Waiton from Abertay University in Dundee. One of the things that's happening, and we've seen this, I mean, you talk about the power of these right-wing groups, and I've no doubt that everything you've said, everything you've written is absolutely smack on, there's no doubt about it. But there's a flip side to this, and the flip side is that we have an entity claiming to be left-wing, claiming to be socialist, which isn't. And it's working very, very successfully to create vulnerable groups that are protected, that cannot be criticised. And by the way, you are right when you say, before I finish my point, you are absolutely right when you say that what the Steve Bannons and the Robinsons and the Southerns and all these goons, these celebrity wannabes who are being used, all they do is they present a false enemy. Muslims, Sikhs, Eastern European immigrants are not your enemy. If your public services can't be accessed, if your wages have been driven down, yes, the migration, that's the symptom. The enemy is the elite responsible for that, the people who make those decisions, not the Pakistani guy living across the road. You and I both understand that implicitly. However, on the flip side of all this is there is an agenda to silence any discussion around this by creating vulnerable groups and by protecting them and by Twitter witch hunts to declare people bigoted and racist who are asking questions. That's another very important aspect of this, Neil, I would say.
I agree, but I think that's why you need to be very, very careful not to get caught up in the hype, because then you come like a straw man, essentially. Of course, you're absolutely right. There is an ease of smearing people with the Nazi far right, but there's also a huge smearing of people by calling them communist or calling them socialist, and not quite understanding what is meant by that. And again saying, you want everywhere to be Venezuela. No, we want free healthcare and free school dinners, right? Nobody wants Stalinism, for example. It would be the counter argument. But I'm quite conscious that we've only got a little bit left.
Well, we've got 20 minutes left, so we'll move it on. Let me just quickly, before you move this on, we're talking about Cambridge Analytica, and I think we're going to talk. You want to talk about Eastern Europe now, don't you? I think you want to talk about that, which is hugely important. NeilSandersMindControl.com. Read the man's books if you haven't read them. Buy them. You've got to support independent thinkers like this, folks, and read these articles about Cambridge Analytica. This is fascinating stuff. It might trigger you. To hell with that. Read it anyway. The truth is in there somewhere, I'm telling you. Neil, the rise of Viktor Orban, the rise of the parties in Italy, you've been looking into their success, and again you're turning over stones and you're finding the same names. Go ahead.
Well, basically this is it. I mean, all of the sort of the AfD, Salvini in Italy, I forget his name, in Czechoslovakia,
Viktor Orban,
the right-wing party.
Oh, he's hungry. Sorry, go ahead.
In Sweden, etc., etc. They're all being basically promoted by Gatestone Media, which is Nina Rosenwald's company, which is also financed through the MEF and the Horowitz Foundation and the Shulman Foundation. And also the MEF are promoting people like Geert Wilders and I believe Marianne Le Pen. And again, Steve Bannon, who's connected to all these people, is trying to connect them all to form this thing called the movement throughout Europe, essentially. What's really strange is that basically, as well as the fact that you've got this sort of tacit Israeli sort of involvement in the promotion of the far right all throughout Europe, SCL admitted to putting far-right people in Argentina, and the last project was basically going to Brazil. Now, the thing that connects all of these is how have they got in exactly the same, or how are they being promoted in exactly the same way that Cambridge Analytica promoted all their previous sort of assets, through fake news, false media, hyping up of the Muslim and immigration threat, data organization. If that's been a problem throughout all of the Brazilian, the South American elections and all of the European elections, is this problem of fake news spreading through social media. And it's exactly the same. Methodology, and it just so happens to be supported by the same group of billionaire-sponsored media arms.
This is staggering. Now, I want you to repeat this. Neil has been looking into the rise of the right in the Czech Republic, in Hungary, in Italy, and the AfD party in Germany, and he's finding that the companies working on behalf of these parties and these individuals, they're the same names. Yeah, it's the same companies, and
again and again and again.
And I've gone through your article. To be fair to you, you've sourced everything. I mean, I have to endorse what you're saying here. They admit it, yeah.
They admit it.
They're bragging about it.
The thing, it takes a bit of pulling and digging. You see, I didn't think this blog, I thought this blog was going to be a 1, maybe 2-part thing. And you said when we did it, oh no, this will go on us. I didn't think so. I just kept pulling on the strings. Yeah. The other thing that I found out is that the Avos brigade, which is the far-right militia that's basically fighting the Russians in the Ukraine, is financed directly by Mossad. Mossad. And the crazy thing about this, which sort of highlights the sort of paradoxical nature of this whole thing, is the Avos group is fighting against Putin because they think Putin's a Jew. And they're being
madness, yeah.
Furthermore, again, the Hungary one, which is the big thing, Viktor Orban got in again by essentially leveraging a false enemy, like talking about this problems with migration. What's ironic about that is that Hungary just recently begged to stay in the EU and got the Tory government to they're not anti-EU. Their entire economy is based on people leaving Hungary, working outside and coming back with money.
Do you know what my biggest regret now is that I don't have my hallelujah jingle. You are right. These are lying bastards. They don't want to leave the single currency. They don't want to reintroduce their own currency and devalue it and start issuing money debt-free in their own country. All the right things to do, all the things Tony Benn would have talked about, God rest his soul. These are liars, aren't they? They're liars, these people. Yeah.
You know, the 200, Orban made a big deal about George Soros and the 200 people that were supporting him to sort of bring down Europe.
Yeah.
Those included anti-corruption agencies, the Red Cross, Amnesty International, basically anybody that was actually looking into the investigating the corruption of the Hungarian government. And don't be under any illusions. It's a dictatorship. It is a complete dictatorship. Bizarrely, George Soros actually paid for Viktor Orban's education, which is slightly embarrassing to him.
That's anyway, incredibly interesting.
The reason that he got in was, again, using absolutely the same techniques, spreading sort of fear, micro-targeting of the population, aggressive nationalism, and it was admitted that the group that actually did his campaign is an Israeli group called Black Cube. Black Cube is basically identical to Cambridge Analytica, and it was founded by Cambridge Analytica's largest shareholder, Vincent Chengui. It's basically made up of ex-Mossad agents. And now here's where it gets really scary. Just in the same way that Cambridge Analytica has got an export control by the British government, which means that it has to be checked with the British government before it's deployed. Black Cube has got an export control with the Israeli Defense Ministry, which means that it has to be checked with the Israeli Defense Ministry and certain people with the Israeli government before it is utilized, which means that the Israeli government and essentially members of Mossad got Viktor Orban elected.
Yeah. Neil, this is unbelievable. And you know, every time you pull away a strand, it opens up about 5 different doors, doesn't it?
Absolutely. This is the thing. It's getting crazy. And I say it very much looks like they've they were responsible for the recent far-right election success in Brazil as well. There's essentially the same techniques were utilized to get him into power, false sort of stories on the media, honey traps against his opponents, which is Cambridge Analytica is famous for. And Alexander Nix, it's not called Cambridge Analytica anymore, it's called Emma Data. But someone overheard a sort of conversation and basically they were going to Brazil, and Alexander Nix and a load of people from Emma Data just seemed to bugger off to Brazil. And then lo and behold, this guy gets elected.
So traditionally over the years, honey traps and all this sort of stuff, this isn't new. This used to happen in electoral campaigns going back to when Moses was wearing short trousers. However, if you didn't read a newspaper then, you didn't get it. But every single one of us now is on a tablet and a phone, and they can deliver that straight onto your screen like that.
The other thing is that essentially, if you can remember, it was quizzes that were used by Cambridge Analytica to basically find out what would be effective slogans for their candidate, who at the time was going to be Ted Cruz, to use. And they were build the wall, drain the swamp, and the idea that the deep state was going after the president or going after their candidate. And this was done utilising, I recently found out, technology taken from Palantir. It was Palantir, which is the Peter Thiel owned sort of data mining colossus that is run by Peter Thiel. And this is where it's all sort of gets really worrying, because the point about this is it's connected to sort of like tracking you on your phone, finding out what your likes are, finding out what your dislikes are, being able to manipulate behavior and your emotions through things like SMISC and JTRIG and all the other sort of Pentagon and GCHQ programs that are almost identical to Cambridge Analytica and have been going on for years. Facial recognition technology, fingerprints to open your phone. You now got facial sort of like all these things that you can, what they call the apps or whatever, where you put a dog ears on your face and stuff like that. Where do you think that information's going?
Augmented reality.
Have you seen China? Have you seen where they've been pulling murderers out of like 60,000 crowds of 60,000 people because they've been recognised by the facial recognition technology?
Yeah, and it's not even that great, is it? I mean, I've had Pippa King on this program. She's an absolute expert on this. And apparently it's not perfect. They have gotten it wrong with people.
But it's this building
but they're doing it.
Normalization of you giving away your data and you expressing your views and you being manipulated and being easily led and driven in a particular way. And they're getting better and better at it.
Hey, Neil, there was an English journalist on the bullet train between Shanghai and somewhere else last week, and he was amazed by an announcement he was hearing on the train. So he took out his phone, fair play to him, and he recorded it. And it was about this social crediting system in China. A woman came on the train, on the voice, on the tannoy, and she said, don't be in the wrong carriage, don't be loitering, don't be doing this, don't be standing at the desk because it'll affect your social credit.
Yeah.
Companies like this, companies like the ones you've been mentioning, are they going to be rolling out this sort of stuff?
Yeah, that's the whole point. Emma Data has got connections to Blackwater as well, which is Eric Prince's sort of mercenary company, which Eric Prince just so happens to be the brother of Betsy DeVos as well, the current education secretary in America and the person behind Turning Point USA, which is Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens and all that. So this is the point. It's a massive web of the same people connected, so spreading out the same messages. Just so happen to be connected to these massive social media and tech companies. You know, the ones that basically we're supposed to be rallying against. Like it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. The disinformation and misinformation and the sort of like that's being used again to sort of basically to get people really angry so that they do stuff without thinking because they fall into patterns.
Here's the question then. Here's the question on that. Could it be possible? I can't dispute what you're finding and the way that you're presenting it. I can't, and I don't want to. I'm not saying I can't because I want to. I don't want to. I'm open-minded to it, and I've read it 16 times backwards and forwards. What I believe is, and again, it's not because I want to believe it. I've concluded what's really behind this. I don't think is either left wing, right wing, front or back, whatever. They don't have a label. This is all part of an agenda to divide us in ways that we were never divided before, because we are so much more easy to control and manipulate. And that's so the players are. I think your work, and I mean it, Neil, it's brilliant work, mate. I think the players are. Of course, because it doesn't work unless the players believe this bullshit, the Steve Bannons and some of these people. I don't mean Tommy Robinson, some of these people. But what's really behind it, they couldn't care less.
No. But you're exactly right, Richie. I totally agree with you. I'm not politically correct. I'll tell you jokes that will make your head spin. Like, I'm not an SJW. I'm annoyed by SJWs. When SJWs came out, I was the first person I wasn't the first person, but I was basically saying, this is counterproductive. Yeah. This is stupid. What you're doing is you're feeding the fire, and basically you're going to make people on the extreme of the other side. You basically, it's very difficult to argue with them because you're looking like an idiot. So I'm very aware of that. I'm actually also a Eurosceptic, as well. So,
but you're worried about what they're going to hand the country to after we leave Europe.
Here's an example.
That's a legitimate question, Neil, and it's a brilliant question. Who is going, if they take the UK out of the European Union, what are they going to do with it? What are they going to do with the country?
Well, here's the thing, right? Okay. A lot of people say, we've got no freedom of speech because there's no constitution in England or whatever. It's like, actually, freedom of speech is covered under the European Directive of the Human Rights Law that guarantees you right to freedom of speech. Now, obviously, when we come out of the EU, the human rights law is not going to be there anymore. Now, the Conservative government, as far as I'm aware, I may have this wrong, have put forward 6 drafts of a replacement for the human rights law, which is all encompassing. It's for everyone. It's for humans. It's not just for migrants. It's not just for terrorists. It's for everyone. And that's why they're so keen to get rid of it. Now, every single proposal that they've been put forward has been described, I think I've got this quote correct, tyrannical at best.
Yeah, I can't argue with that.
That's the problem. Okay,
it is the problem.
If this train's crap, let's get off this train. But let's not just blindly jump into the darkness and hope that we land somewhere.
Yeah, but your work has demonstrated that they're not just blindly jumping off into the dark, hoping they land somewhere. They know exactly where they want to land. It's going to be a lockdown. You know what? We should be leaving the European Union to genuinely, get people back into work, to start manufacturing again in the country, to open the fisheries. That's why we should be doing that. To not to be borrowing money from central banks, but to issue our own debt-free currency. All the proper things, but they're not going to do any of that. I've never been that naive. I've supported leaving, and I've banged on. But of course, I've said since day one we're never going to leave. Now I know you disagree. I think we might have a disagreement there, and I totally respect you. I think you think that we will leave. I don't think we will.
If someone forced me to throw my hat in a ring, I'd say I reckon we're still going to leave. I don't think. I think so. I totally get your argument, and again, I might well be wrong. It's just, as I say, if someone forced me to put my hat in a ring, I'd say no. I reckon we're going to leave because I think people have got a lot invested in leaving. Not that it's going to be beneficial for everybody, but hiding money and setting up new sort of business ventures and stuff like that, and basically sort of cash out of chaos, I think.
Yeah. Hey, listen, there's a breaking news story, by the way.
Oh yeah.
We've mentioned him, Tommy Robinson. The BBC is reporting that PayPal has decided that they won't process payments on his behalf anymore. Now, I'm not trying to virtue signal, not at all. I interviewed Robinson a few times several years ago when I was in Spain. The last interview didn't go very well for him, it must be said. But I totally reject that. I don't agree with that at all. I don't care what this guy's opinions are. And I despise this guy because I think he's a genuine racist. I really do believe he's a genuine little thug. But I don't agree that PayPal should do that. I don't agree with that. Yeah, they've said that PayPal will not be used to promote hate, violence or discrimination. Well, that's a laugh anyway.
Come on.
Yeah, right. So have you any comment on that? They've said no more Tommy Robinson.
Again, I'm not for censorship or banning people, to be quite
same
honest.
As me, yeah.
Like occasionally, like anybody, I'll get a little sort of that serves you right. But yeah, I'm with you. I think it is. It's not really. It's a pointless gesture as well. I mean, obviously it does affect people and stuff like that, but
won't affect him.
That's not that's not sorting out that's attacking the symptom, really, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Like, rather than saying, like, let's have a dialogue and highlight why Tommy Robinson is wrong and why really, you should be ashamed to be publishing his thoughts because they're just wrong. And talk about it in a sensible way rather than in a reactionary way.
Yeah, we used to do that, didn't we? We used to share platforms with people we didn't agree with and try to defeat them on their ideas. In 2018, sadly, there is an increasing agenda. Sadly, mostly on the left. And again, I'm not right. I've never been anything like right wing. Sadly, there's an increasing drive towards absolutely shutting down something you disagree with, and it gives it power, Neil. And I wonder how these companies you've written so brilliantly about, how they thrive on that,
Oh, of course, because it's outrage culture. It's that white heat of it's cult-like behaviour, and it's cult, and you can apply this to both ends of the spectrum. What does a cult give you? It tells you exactly how the world is and how the world should be. It tells you where your position is in that world, and it gives you like-minded people for psychological security.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the behaviour that we're seeing, in both extremes. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I'm not for that, and I'm not for this. Oh no, don't say that because it'll offend this person. So grow up, right? Okay,
Absolutely.
it's about intent and it's about content. Okay, we're adult enough to say, look, guy, I'm not stupid. I can see your dog whistle. We don't really want to watch it. You go and watch it. Do it somewhere else, and we'll all walk out. You've got the ability to walk out. So I'm with you on that, man. I'm not for this. I think a lot of it's overstated, to an extent. That again,
it is, and it isn't. I mean,
these ridiculous examples. You can find. I could find 10 on YouTube right now, but I could also find 10 examples where basically, there's. Like with anything with extremes, to be quite honest, again, it's on both sides, because a lot of the SJW sort of concerns are this happened and blah, blah, blah. It's like, that didn't happen. But then on the counter side, there's stuff like, well, all universities have banned trousers because they're a part of the oppressive patriarchy or something shit like that. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, last week, tragic that Oxford Union cancelled the appearance of Alice Weidel, the leader of the German Alternative for Germany party, and that kills me. I mean, when I was in uni, I didn't know any of this stuff. I wasn't exposed to any of this stuff, but knowing it now, I'd love to be a mature student now, and I'd love to have Alice Weidel come to my university, not so that I could be abusive or rude, but that I could say to her, why do you think Angela Merkel left 1 million migrants into the country? You want to blame the migrants, you want to label them, or you want the German people to see them as a bunch of raping, thieving bastards. Well, first of all, they're not. Their countries have been destroyed by the imperialist policies of our countries and our military might for other reasons, and of course the Israelis. Why do you think Merkel did it? Who told her to do that? Do you not think that happened because it ultimately serves a divide and conquer agenda in Germany? I'd love to, but of course nobody can put that question to Alice Weidel now because she's been banned and she's a martyr.
I'll tell you why some of the now this is a fact as well that a lot of people don't like, is that the reason that a lot of these refugees ended up in Germany and France is because basically they were actually going other places. They were going on trains through Hungary to other designated places. And Viktor Orban stopped the trains in Hungary, got everybody off. They did a big photo about invading hordes, put them on state-sponsored buses and sent them to Germany. Now, that's absolutely true. You can check it out. He did that. And then he blamed it on, these forces and stuff like that. But you're absolutely right as well. The result of that is that you've got this tension in Germany because 1 million extra people. And
who does that benefit?
Well, it benefit, people that want chaos, absolutely.
That's right. And I'll say this to my dying breath, and I know you will as well. and I've had it. I meet sometimes when I'm in Manchester. It's very, very rare that I get recognised. It's very rare because of radio. I mean, I've done the TV thing, but occasionally somebody will come up and they will have I agree with you, Richie, about, leaving Brexit and all that. And they'll talk about migrants. And I'm blue in the face saying, do you really think that the guy who came in from Syria or that the family that came from Poland, do you really think they're your enemy? What that guy has done is what you would do if you were in his situation.
Yeah.
I'm
old enough, Richie, right, to remember when the same bullshit was leveraged at the Irish.
Oh, yeah, that's right. There was a time, yeah.
And then the poor, then people on benefits, then the Polish, then the Romanians, then the Hungarians, then the poor again, and then the Muslims.
Divert your attention away from who's really responsible.
Demon.
Yeah. Policy makers, financial elites and banking families are responsible for what happens. So divert your attention away from them and look at the guy with the brown skin across the road. It's very easy. And because the poorest people in the country are ignored, it's not because they're stupid. They're far from stupid. That's why they turn to gimps like Tommy Robinson. Because they've been ignored. Nobody listens to them.
Yeah, it gives you an element of power. Psychologically, I totally get it as well, because basically, I don't think people get that it's the banking elites and the wealthy that have got the power, and it's these other minority groups. It's oxymoronical that these other minority groups have got power over you to the degree that they sort of explain it. Psychologically, it's easier to have a go at the minority groups because you feel superior and you might win.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult to have a go at the royal family or the establishment or MI5 or whatever, because you're going to lose.
Well, you're a conspiracy theorist and you're a madman. That's how you get shut down anyway.
Well, that's also true, yeah. But I mean, it's going to be very, very difficult for us to sort of hold Jacob Rees-Mogg to task, isn't it?
Yeah.
But we can vent that frustration. And again, this is what's so very, very clever, and this is the sort of fundamental sort of premise behind all propaganda, is to direct your anger in a plausible way, or in a way that seems plausible. And it does two things. Just several things. It aligns you with people in a sort of unifying way. It gives you a clear enemy. It gives you, right? There's a weird thing where if you know, a friend of mine broke up with his partner recently, and there was a period where basically they didn't know whether she was coming back, etc., 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 and he just kept texting and saying, "Look, if it's over, just let me know it's over," because even though that's not what he wanted, because he's got certainty, you can psychologically move on. And the horrible thing is uncertainty. And this is, again, it's a double-edged sword, because that's how they play on it. This sort of uncertainty of, is your culture being eroded? Are you going to be able to pay for your bills next time?
Yeah.
Is this going to be detrimental to your society? Is this going to be detrimental to you? Are you becoming disenfranchised in society? All that uncertainty and stuff like that. People look for...
They do.
Definites.
And they don't know that the very people asking them those questions are the people often responsible for the policies that led
it's
it
like
there.
The Scientology,
Mad,
it's
isn't it?
very much like the Scientology test, actually.
It's crazy.
Do you feel down sometimes? Do you feel underappreciated? Yeah. Do you ever feel that other people get opportunities unfairly that you don't? You should join Scientology.
Who could say no to that? I'm 90 seconds before I get out. I've got to end and get this on a turnaround quick for the repeats. Mate, you know that you can come back anytime. When this moves on, as it will, don't wait to be asked back, Neil. Just get in touch, mate. It's brilliant. It's genuinely brilliant work. I really mean that. And it's challenging, it's asked me to go places maybe I didn't want to go, but it's really good stuff. Neil Saunders, mindcontrol.com. Neil's books are there, and the blog with all of these articles. Read them from the beginning if you haven't done before. Great stuff, Neil. Have a brilliant weekend, mate. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate it, and we'll talk again real soon.
Thank you very much, man.
Legend. Bye for now. Neil Saunders, folks, top man on the Richie Allen Show. That's it for Thursday's programme, and that's it for the week. Getting out now because I've got to turn this around before I go over the 2 hours. Massive thanks to Dean Henderson, hendersonneftuck.wordpress.com. Neil Saunders, mindcontrol.com, for all that wonderful work on Cambridge Analytica. You and I will do it again on Sunday morning at 11 a.m. UK time for Sunday View. Thanks to all my guests this week. Thanks to you. Look after yourselves and one another. I'll see you Sunday, leaving you with some old school U2.